Welcome to episode 70 of the World Builders Anvil. As always, I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. And right off the bat, I want to thank you all so much. Some of you I know have listened, I don't know if to all episodes, but to very, very many of these episodes. So first off, before I get into the world building topic for today, or I get off into what's going to be changing in the show, more specifically than in my quick announcement that came out Monday, I want to thank all of you who've taken the time to communicate with me especially. But even if you just listen, even if you're not trying to actively build something or make it better right now, the act of you listening will hopefully keep the cogs turning and inspire you to some point where you come up with something great that someday I can maybe consume and think is the best work ever. Maybe you can become that new 800-pound gorilla that right now is Middle Earth, but someone out there is the next Middle Earth. And the question is who and when. But now let's get to the world building topic. Today's world building topic is going to be on race to culture. It's part 3 in my series on building a new insect ring. And then after that, I'm going to go into a lot of detail about what are the changes to the format of the show. Now, to start off, I want to talk a little bit about the norms of the society. First off, there is a huge duty to the colony. This goes from the bottom to the top of the race. Normally, duties to states or people or a race are either a sense of duty, this obligation to do a job, or an actual duty caused by a position within the society. And in those scenarios, it would not be a racial duty. When I talk about a racial duty, it's genetically imprinted on the ants to take care of the colony. And that goes all the way from the workers to the queen. So that is the norm. Now, that's not to say there is no individual expression within the culture of ants. There is some, however, it's different. It springs from the duty to the colony. And you could probably argue back and forth and question whether or not it's actually a free will choice for independent behavior. But there is really no driving force behind the ants that force them to come around this idea of duty to the colony. But what they will do is within the realm of their duty, they will make decisions based on their own wants and needs and on how it will help the colony. Because that is ultimately the driving goal. You can think of these ants kind of like the new socialist man. Now, I'm not a huge fan of socialism. In fact, I don't subscribe to the theories of socialism. And one of the problems was to get there, or at least some communists felt you had to go through these different stages to get to communism, which is a form of socialism, a communal system with no leaders, people working for the need of where they lived, not for themselves. However, the problem that at least the communists or some of the communists saw was that men weren't ready for this. Men and women, they acted in their own self-interest. They acted in the self-interest of their family. There were lots of things they put before society. So part of the reasons why you have, or part of the reasoning given at least for why you have the Soviet Union raise up the way it is to help create the new socialist man. And I would imagine in Germany, a lot of the eugenics that were going on there was somewhat the same idea. However, I haven't heard people talk about that before. And I'm not super versed, and I'm probably not getting this quite right, but you get the idea. It doesn't work for them because humans don't seem capable. Whether or not that's true, it's a different argument. However, for the sake of this, these ants are actually the opposite. They have trouble getting away from working for the state, the society they're from. So that is a huge centerpiece for the cultural norms. Now, another one is job choosing. And there is genetic components to this. And it is determined from birth what part of society you belong to. Whether you are a warrior, whether you are a male who will someday breed with a queen or position to, or are you a queen? It's by birth. And you're all the children of the queen who gave birth to you. You might or might not have the same father as some of the aunts around you. In your generation, you have the same father. And that'd be actually what kind of forms the generation. Would be who is the father who inseminated the queen for these series of eggs. That would be one generation of ants. So when you look at the ant population, they choose their jobs. Now, if they're in a warrior society, they get to choose what house they're in. So are they the ant who goes out and raids neighbors? Are they the ant who stays back and acts as a guard for the queen herself, or the queen that bore that ant themselves? Or are they the warrior who goes out with the workers to protect the workers? Or do they help protect the colony as a whole? So there are sort of different houses of warriors. And this was sort of inspired from going to see the houses of Israel at Harvard last weekend. And people will be broken down into houses. And the warriors are sort of broke down this way as well. And the warriors are sort of broken down this way as well. Now, there's also worker houses. There are workers who are out to go harvest. There are workers who tend the internal fields. As I spoke about before, the food is grown underground. You need workers to work those fields. So those are two different types of workers. And there are other types of workers too. There are artisans. There are traders. There are actually diplomat workers. Those are all workers. Now, when you get higher up into the male and queen class, the males who actually are fertile and the queen, their job is quite clear: have babies. The male ants, once they have actually impregnated a queen, they've gone through their turn, they've lost their wings, they will move into a defensive position where they become literally the personal guard to the queen, whoever they impregnated, and in a way, helping protect their children. But with no regard to the children, with regard to the colony. And at the heart of the colony is always the queen. Even though, in the last part of the norms would be that they are leaderless. Now, the queen does not have court. People do not petition the queen for anything. Really, the only decision the queen has is whether or not the colony is at capacity. And what will happen is when the queen thinks the colony is at capacity, she will turn back her primary role, which is to deliver children and be the mother to the ants. She will deliver another queen at that point, and genetically that works out that way. That new queen will get up and go off somewhere and start a new colony somewhere else. Now, if there's no other room for this colony to grow, they might not be connected at some later point in 10 years. Maybe they're at war with each other because they're no longer part of the same state. Now, many queens will have sub-colonies in a greater state of the ant kingdoms, but not everyone. So that is the cultural norms for this new ant culture we're coming up. Now let's go on a little bit further. Now, usually I would talk a little bit when I talk about races about the actual physical description. I would recommend you go back to episode 76, and that's where I talk about the physical build of the ants. I'm not going to repeat that behavior here, but it's episode 76 is where I talk about the physical specimens that this ant race belonged to. Now let's go on to another very interesting topic, and this one is religious beliefs. And I'm just going to go to the basics here. I'm not going to get all into developing this completely fleshed out because I'm really not planning to do anything with this. It's really an example to share out of how to develop a race. However, religion is very important for the development of a culture. And since this culture is going to be very much tied to a race, unlike most of the cultures I typically build, religion's at the heart of the culture. I would imagine most cultures, unless for some reason the race doesn't subscribe to religion. However, let's get into religion a bit here. Now, the whole idea with this is there is a battle going on between the gods. Classic thing. There are two gods in the realm of antdom. There is the sun god, which is a male. It flies up in the sky. And there is the planet, which originally was not the planet. It was the first queen ant. Now, the sun god felt there needed to be something permanent. So he brutally murders the queen ant, the first queen ant. She had no children. However, in the battle, he impregnated her. And from that, she turns into the lamb. And from her comes out the first generation of actual queens in the prehistoric sense of the ants. Now, these ants move out and somehow get fertilized. Maybe it's immaculate. Maybe the males just kind of come out as well too. But they get impregnated and they start the first colonies. At the beginning, the colonies are only one queen, as I've described in a previous episode. So each of the first 21 queens all start new colonies all over what the corpse of the old queen was, and which is now the planet. It is Podcastia. And these ants start their own colonies. Colonies start growing. And over time, some of the colonies meet up with each other and sort of merge together. And over time, they grow out. Now, in the battle between the sun and the planet, there is the sky. The sky is the battlefield. The sky is where the planet and the sun fight against each other. The planet uses rain because rain will quench fire. And so when the planet attacks the sun, the rains will come and they will try and wash away the fire. However, the sun is clever. It will fight back. It will use wind and it will try and push the rain out so its fire can't be quenched. And where my ants live are sort of near the equator, mainly to the south of it. And this is sort of a monsoon style season where you have peaceful time around part of the year. And then another part of the year, you will actually have a battle going on. So what you're going to do is you're going to have important dates at the beginning and the end of the rainy season. And any storm itself would be considered almost a religious act. And then you have the moon. The moon is a colony that the ants are trying to achieve. It is the perfect colony. It is perfectly symmetrical, which is very important to the ants. All of their colonies are spherical in shape. And the moon is a thing that the queen god of the planet created to show them the example. And when it is in full status, when the moon is completely exposed, the ants rejoice, the ants celebrate. It's a very holy time. When there's a new moon, it's considered very bad. Bad luck. You don't do work unless you have to in a full moon. And everything that happens then is bad. A new queen who would be born in that period would be ejected or maybe even killed because she would be considered evil. Now, the workers would not be. However, any queen that would happen to come out at that time would be killed. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution of the species. They have multiple queen states. So essentially, let's say the state of Connecticut is a territory for one of these colony states. And due to the amount of foliage in Connecticut, approximately 7 million ants can sustain life here. So what will happen is when the first queen has additional queens, instead of leaving out, they're going to actually go over with some of the males who are there, and they're going to dig down and they're going to take up another area near where the first queen's nest was. And that is the sort of prime colony. And she'll create the second colony and then a third colony. And then let's say it takes 21 colonies to make a population of about 7 million. At that point, the 21 queens of those colonies will determine, hey, if we keep going at the rate we are, we're going to destroy all the foliage. This is a problem they've ran into in the past where they've overgrown in areas and they've starved themselves. Or they've been forced to move. When you move, you're at risk. So they don't like moving anymore, even though there is a heritage of moving early on in the race. They now like to stay stationary. they like to pick two different spots. They like to pick high places and they like to pick plains. So mountains, literally, they'll pick one big mountain and the whole thing will be infested on the windward side. I'm sorry, on the wetward side, on the side with the rain, ironically, they will make all of their openings going out. The windward side is considered evil. You stay away from that. You stay on the side with the water because that is essentially a blessing of your God, of the good God. Now, the sun god is considered vital too and is also worshipped. However, does not have the same predominance as the planet itself, which they consider the queen god. Now, this mythology is in no way meant to be real. In Podcastia, that's not the actual creation myth, but it's what's believed by this culture. It's what they grow up believing. It's what they teach generation after generation. To them, it's true. But now you have slightly different needs in ants and mountains versus ants and plains. And when colonies come together, there will be wars. This is not a unified thing. Colonies don't hold allegiance to each other, and mountain ants and plain ants do not like each other. They actually consider each other a pest on each other's territory, and they will go to war with each other over it. Traits. There's only one racial trait for this group. It is called hatred of dwarfs. They hate dwarfs. And a lot of that goes from early on when ants are moving around. Dwarfs are established in mountains. They start fighting. Some dwarfs split off. They fight more ants. So there's this racial animus that builds up with dwarfs and ants competing with each other. And the problem being dwarfs want the minerals, not the plant materials. The ants want the plant materials, not the minerals, but the ants live where the dwarfs want to dig, and ants don't like that. And sometimes it's in the mountains, sometimes it's in the plains. Dwarfs like to go down, ants live down. Sometimes they're just mining stuff up, but either way, they're natural competitors for space, and because of that, they dislike each other. Now, that is all I have for the actual world-building episode. If that's all you care about, and you don't care about the changes to the show, don't worry about it. Log off, and next week you can listen to the beginning of the episode again. However, there's more to do today, and today's going to be very focused. The last part of the show. And it probably won't be quite as long as a normal episode going into the future, but it might be. Okay. So now I want to talk about the change of format in the World Builders Anvil. And some of this is from going to Podcast New England last weekend. It got my brain changing on ways to deliver content in a more interesting way to people. Start to vary up the content. And I think one of the problems the show has is it's just me. And I do have guests occasionally who I interview. However, there are interviews that I think are cool, which there's nothing wrong with that. And there's something to learn from other people who are going through the same struggles. But since my target audience is really people who are trying to create either books or RPG worlds or video game worlds or whatever, you're trying to world build. And where I do plan to still interview authors, and those will be a separate episode, I think. I'm not quite sure. This format thing is evolving, much like one of the societies in my world would. I do plan to release the show every Thursday at 12 a.m. So at 12 a.m., and the first one will be June 18th, which is today, or really not today for me, but it'll be today when you hear this. At 12 a.m. will be the first episode launch. It will always start off with a segment on world building. And all of the segments will have a world building feel about them. Or I do go into storytelling, but to me, it's like, is it the cart or the horse? You need both of those things when you have a world. So we're going to go into both of those topics, and it won't be me. And you just notice I used a plural there. I bring on a person who played for me for years, who's a fan of science fiction and a fan of fantasy. Maybe not as much as some of you, maybe more than some of you. But he's going to help bring a perspective from an avatar's point of view, from someone who actually consumes content, what he likes, what he dislikes. What I'll also be doing is trying to get interview questions out to people and asking them what they like, what they dislike about fantasy. So there's going to be some avatar discussion in there as well, too, of what they're looking for. And one that might help refine where you're going with something if you don't really know what your avatar is. If you find what you think is appealing, you pick that avatar and you sort of sculpt it into yours. So when you deliver content, you will actually be delivering content that will be helpful to your avatar. You'll have someone to have the discussion with on whether or not you should add that new scene or remove it. Now, world building will be the first topic. Once we get to the world building topic, we're going to break the show into probably segments. And the segment list is going to change over time as Mike and I get more involved in doing this together. There'll probably be more segments added in, but there will be segments, and you'll see some show types based about them already. But, first we'll have world building only segments. Tips on building a culture, on building a race, on building monsters and languages. So, and really all of the aspects of the thing, but just short tips. I might or might not be getting some other people along to help with those as well, too. We're going to have an I Am Your Avatar segment, which I just talked about a little bit with my friend Mike, who's going to be the new co-host on the show to help keep the show a little bit more cheery as well, too. But like I said, when I go out and I meet people who fall into the perspective as a fan, whether they're a writer, whether they are a consumer of fiction, will not matter. They will be asked questions, and I will share them in a segment called Am I Your Avatar? Now, hopefully, and some of this is if I can find the right kind of people to work with, I want to have a part on art tips. Essentially, for those of you who like to sketch out what you do, there's some great people who do a lot of work with that out there. Map making, what's coming up in the world of fiction, and more Radic Explorer moments, more moments where I kind of delve into worlds that I found or people have recommended me to talk about. And I appreciate everyone who recommends stuff to me. It really helps. But just to go out and talk about some other things that, and I don't like to call it a review because I'm not really going to go into pros and cons of something. But when I look at something, I want to talk about what works for it. I'm hoping to bring people in to talk about indie games, video games specifically. I oftentimes talk a lot about role-playing and writing. So I'm going to see if I can gather up some people to talk a bit more about indie games and video games themselves. And I talk a little bit about video game worlds. But I honestly don't play a lot of video games. There's some I obsess over obsessively. Fallout 4, I'm sorry. Yes, Fallout 4 would be one of them. But there are some shows that I obsess about compulsively, and I play those a lot. And there are other ones I don't touch very much. And there are some books I love. But, I'm hoping to get some more people in for at least segments or maybe sometimes as guest hosts where we'll cover some of these topics. Books, new books that are coming down. If any of the authors I've interviewed are out there, they're coming off the new book, I might invite them on for a segment to talk about that book specifically and about that world. And short stories if people want to share them. Some are going to come from me, and there will be more. Like I said, this list is going to evolve and grow over time. So especially over the next few months, Mike and I will need all the feedback we can get of the segments you are interested in, the segments you aren't interested in, or things that we didn't think about that you think we should consider. If you want to do that, shoot me at Twitter at JEFFERYWINGRAM, or go to my website, sign up for my email newsletter. That's the easiest way to get my email address, which is JWINGRAM@gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com. But like I said, the easiest thing to do, go join my email newsletter list. You'll get some emails from me. Not a lot. If anything, I don't send out as much as people say I should from a marketing standpoint. I want to be delivering content. I don't want to be just marketing to people. And when I do have author interviews again, which I do hope to start up again, there will be a segment on, but it'll be a separate episode. It'll be just like the author episode now. They'll be on Saturday, released at 12 a.m. as well. Now, subscribe to us in iTunes and rate and review us in iTunes as well. Those things help us get found, especially with the changes to the show. The more feedback we can get, the better we can provide the show to you. Now, the rating for the world building topic today is intermediate. And maybe I want to move the rating up to right after that segment, but The rating is intermediate. I think it's a little bit more complex if you're really trying to build a naturalistic culture, one based off of the strengths and weaknesses of a race or a group of races. I think it's a little bit more difficult than building a race or building a culture independently of a race and then trying to get races to fill into it. But I think the payoff is at the back end. I think the race will feel more real. There will always be people who disagree with you, but who cares? Now, the world building task for the day: build the basics for your race's culture. So build the basics for your race's culture. Go through what are the norms of your culture? What are some of the religious points? If you haven't created a description, what is the basic description? But what are the fundamental cores that your culture has around this race? And it's even more important if the race doesn't get pulled in very early into another culture close by. This race would not, it doesn't fit into the genetics of the actual race. Now, the real world task for the day: attend conferences. And the reason I say that is if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a podcaster, if you want to be a great IT person, if you want to be great at the industry you work in, don't just go off of the knowledge you've learned in college and what you learn on the job. Go out, listen to other people's ideas. Those other ideas will help you hopefully do better at all the things you're going to try. Because once you become stagnant, once you stop growing, it's going to become very stale for you. Once it becomes stale, it becomes hard to do. And going to conferences are a way to learn from a bunch of other people and to network with a lot of other people who can help you be better at what you want to be better at. As much as that works for work, it works for your personal life. You might not call it a conference if it's for personal life, but you can gather with people to talk about stuff, how to do an activity better. And that's what I did when I went to Podcast New England 15, and I hope that's what you do some more of. Now, episode 79 will be our next episode next Thursday. Mike Miller should be with me on that first episode. That should be his first episode here. And we will talk about how to make a fun monster, something a little different. And it will, as a little more of a tease, it'll be based off of ants again. And it's something that an idea that I have with one of my friends. Look forward to seeing you there. And as always, make sure to go to gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com for the show notes. It'll be under podcasting, World Builders Anvil. That's a great place to get all of the information from the episode that you've just listened to and to see all the resources that we've talked about in this episode. Thanks for joining us this episode of the World Builders Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at Gardul.com, to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike while the myth rolls high.